Look at the weather.
It's beautiful here.
Non-stop rain.
Oh, man, it is a blazer out there.
It's cold and it's shivery.
It is cold.
Really coming down here.
I really enjoy your weather reports.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, we're talking weather in a whole new way. From historical events to what's coming up, plus weather news, science, safety, fun facts, and more.
I like where this is going.
This is Weather Weekly. Weather Weekly with Wish TV Storm Track 8 meteorologist Marcus Bailey.
It is Weather Weekly. I am meteorologist Marcus Bailey with Wish TV in Indianapolis. This is episode number 60. Another milestone. Good to be with you here. We are actually on break this week. So this is pre-recorded, and I wanted to, because since we're just piggybacking off of Severe Weather Preparedness Week last week over the state of Indiana, and we talked a little bit of that in the podcast, thought it'd be a good opportunity to replay one of my favorite episodes, at least from what I got to talk about. And that was my storm chase trip that I was able to take back in college between my junior and senior year at Ball State University. It was kind of a life-changing event in terms of, I mean, I was always passionate about weather, but really that trip kind of solidified this is what I wanted to do. And what it did is it, you know, you can learn and you can read in textbooks, and I talk about this in the previous podcast, but you can read all you want about the world of meteorology, but to actually kind of see that happen before your eyes, and you have a very knowledgeable professor like I had in Dr. David Arnold at Ball State say, this is why this is happening. Just kind of put everything together a lot more simple than what it did than when you're just sitting in a classroom. So just an incredible trip. So after the break, we're going to talk about, or I'm going to get back to, this was an episode. This was one of my earlier episodes. This aired, it was episode 14, the week of May 11th, 2021. So nearly a year ago was when this original podcast episode aired. So sit tight, and after the break, you will hear about my storm chase trip at Ball State University. That is next here on Weather Weekly.
Audible's romance collection has something to satisfy every side of you. When it comes to what kind of romance you're into, you don't have to choose just one. Fancy a dalliance with a duke, or maybe a steamy billionaire. You could find a book boyfriend in the city and another one tearing it up on the hockey field. And if nothing on this earth satisfies, you can always find love in another realm. Discover modern rom-coms from authors like Lily Chu and Ali Hazelwood, the latest romantasy series from Sarah J. Maas and Rebecca Yarros, plus Regency favorites like Bridgerton and Outlander. And of course, all the really steamy stuff. Your first great love story is free when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Welcome back to episode number 14 here of Weather Weekly. I always appreciate your time. Thanks for spending time here. And this will be a good one for me. I think this will be fun. And like I said, I'm hoping to have a dialogue with some storm chasers coming up here over the coming weeks as we are right in the heart of severe weather season. But I just thought this would be a fun topic because of the anniversary of Twister. So those of you that are fans of Wish TV, you remember meteorologist Brad Mousehart. He is a good friend of mine. He's now down in Cincinnati. He posted on Facebook. He posted, today is the 25th anniversary of the greatest movie ever made. And he posted the poster for Twister on there. And I don't know if it's the greatest movie ever made, but it is a fun movie. If you're a weather lover, it is a fun movie. There are a lot of inaccuracies scientifically, if you want to get nitty gritty about it and everything. But if you don't go in trying to be Mr. Scientist, it's a fun movie. It's a fun movie. It is extremely quotable. In fact, there's numerous websites I think you can go on and you can get T-shirts that says "I have cows." You know, that's a distinct line from Twister. But when they're driving through and they see twin tornadoes and there's cows flying around and everything like that. I think I've been known to say a time or two just with the family. We're going on green, or say greenage, when they're all looking at the storm starting to form, and Bill Paxton is out there. Bill is his name in the movie, and they're getting ready to kind of go chase storms and stuff like that. So it's an extremely quotable movie, and it's fun. It came out in a prime era for me in, what would be, do the math, 2006. So I was a freshman in high school. I remember going to... may have been the Regal in Carmel, possibly. It's out by the Clay Terrace Mall, which the Clay Terrace Mall did not exist in 1996. But there was that cinema that was out there, the Regal Cinema, just off of, what would that be, 146th Street. Went with a buddy of mine, and we watched the movie. I think he was bored. I thought it was great. And it's funny, I still will... probably watch that movie at least once a year. I don't actively maybe pop it in the DVD player, but if it's on TV, I usually will stop wherever it's at. It brings back a lot of good memories from when I was in college, because we would watch that. All of my meteorology buddies at Ball State, we'd sit there and watch it. I remember coming back from my storm chase trip, which I'm going to spend time talking about here in a second. And I probably watched that movie almost every day for about a week or two straight, because I was coming off such a high of being on that storm chase trip. So, but it's interesting that movie, I think, resonated with so many people my age. And I think there is such an influx of storm chasers, whether they're trying to do it professionally or doing it as a hobby, because of that movie being released 25 years ago. And that leads me into my story here of my one and only opportunity of being able to go and chase storms. And unfortunately, this career that I've been in the positions I've been in, it never really granted me the opportunity to chase much. It was always a good resume booster to tell news directors, yeah, I have that experience. I've been out chasing before. I've seen several tornadoes. I know what I'm doing when it comes to going out and chasing. But when you're a meteorologist, you're in the studio, more than likely. And again, up until 6 years ago, I was either doing mornings or I was the chief in Peoria. So I had to be the guy that was in studio. I wouldn't be able to go out and chase. And it just really hasn't had the opportunity. The severe weather hasn't been there quite as much here in central Indiana for me to chase. Plus, we have an enormous team. We've got photographers that know what they're doing when it comes to chasing as well. So usually you need to have more hands on deck in the studio than necessarily out in the field if they can go out and cover that on their own. So haven't had the opportunity to really do it quite as much, but I did have the opportunity in 2004. 2004, so it was my junior year of college going into my senior year. So that's summer. Ball State offered a class that was the study of severe local storms. And what we did was we went out for a full month and traveled basically the nation's midsection. We aimed out in the Central Plains, and we kind of just hung out there for 4 weeks. Now that class is offered in 2 different stints at 2 weeks apiece. And I can kind of discuss the pros and cons of that maybe a little bit later, but it was a month-long class when I was there. 6 credit hours. So it was good stuff, but it was a very popular trip. Now, guiding that trip, and he is no longer with Ball State, but someone that I deeply respect, probably one of my favorite teachers, instructors in my entire educational career, is Dr. David Arnold. And he was a fantastic guide and teacher for that whole trip. I felt like I got closer to him during that trip, and I learned so much. The way he was able to explain things happening in real time made a huge difference. But starting from the beginning, we started that trip. You had to go through the sign-up process, and finally I think they brought in like 15 of us. It might have been a little bit more, but like 15 of us that went on that trip. I think we had either 2 or 3 of the big white vans that the university supplied for us. We had a meeting the week prior, and Dr. Arnold, we called him Doc. He was very open with us and said, look, there is a very high probability that we will not see a tornado. Tornadoes are extremely rare. Obviously, they make news headlines. They're, impressive to see on the news. And so you always want to show that. But, the realism of it all is they don't happen very often, right? And the big ones happen even less often. They're extremely rare. So tornadoes are rare in themselves. Big tornadoes, EF3, EF4, EF5, are extremely, extremely rare. So he wanted to stress to us, look, you guys are paying a lot of money for this trip. You're going to be gone from your family and friends for a while. But I don't want to get he wanted to set expectations, which is, that's the right thing to do. Because weather is no sure thing. We all know that. If you're a weather lover, the forecast isn't a sure thing. And so he would say, look, we're going to see storms. You're going to see some beautiful parts of the country. And if you take it with that and the process of forecasting and learning about how the atmosphere is working as we forecast on a daily basis, then you're going to get a lot out of this class. If you are just coming to this class because you want to see a tornado, expect to be disappointed. So he had us all going in with the right mindset. We had a great group of future meteorologists with us. Many at least worked in TV for a little while, and then maybe family life happened and they got out. Several of them are now working or had worked or currently working with the National Weather Service. One of them is actually working with the Storm Prediction Center. Brian Smith is his name. Smart man. And he was very smart as a kid in college. So no surprise in the success that he is having. But we all kind of went together and, it was interesting. Very good bonding experience. We all got along. No one really fought. It's kind of it's a crapshoot when you throw 15 to 20 college kids into the mix that probably didn't spend all of their time together. Sure, you had your kind of cliques of friends in the meteorology department. Not that it was a huge department to begin with. We had many classes together, but we didn't necessarily all hang out together outside of class. So kind of throwing us all together, you never know what's going to happen. But I think it helped our trip that things were really hot and heavy from the get-go. So May 2004, for those of you that don't remember, was an extremely active year. And so we went out in early May, and from the beginning, we had storms to kind of to get going. So what we would do on a daily basis is we would spend our nights driving to get ourselves in the right position for the next day so that we didn't have to drive hours and hours and hours just to go chase. So we started right out of the gate. We left Muncie, Indiana, probably around 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and we drove until about 10 o'clock at night, and believe we stopped in Hays, Kansas. If I'm not... I'd have to double check on a map, but I believe it was around Hays, Kansas. That was a long drive. That's a long way to go when you're cramped up in a van. And you have to remember, smartphones really weren't a thing back then. We did have some limited text messaging capabilities, but we lost cell service pretty quickly once we got west of the Mississippi River. You're starting to get in wide open country out there. You had to keep calling. I think the number was *87 maybe, or stars. I can't remember. At least for my carrier, we had to call that constantly to download new cell tower data on our phone, essentially, so we could actually get some reception. But we set ourselves up for a chase the next day. And so how every day would work, and I think this, looking back on it, this was probably my favorite parts of the trip. So we'd stay in hotel rooms, and we all had roommates and stuff. And so we'd go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and Doc would have a briefing for us in his room at some given time. He'd let us know and say, hey, everybody meet in my room at, depending on if we needed to travel a lot or not. He'd say, hey, meet in my room either maybe 7 or 8 o'clock in the morning. Maybe sometimes he'd let us sleep in. It'd be 9 o'clock in the morning. But we'd meet in his room. He'd put a projector screen on his bed, hook it up to his laptop, and he'd show us everything that we look at as meteorologists online. We'd look at the current conditions, the current setup, how everything's kind of playing out. We'd look at the Storm Prediction Center risks for the day. And finally, then we'd go through the forecast. We'd look at a lot of the high resolution models, looking at all the layers, and kind of as a team, Doc would want us to decide where to go. Now, he had no problem saying, no, I don't think that's probably the right spot. But he wanted us to work that out on our own first and explain why we thought that, which I think was huge, because we easily could have been like, well, I want to go here, or I want to go here because that's right in the middle of the moderate risk, but he wanted more than that. He wanted to know, okay, this is where all of the convergence is happening. This is where your lower level jet is really picking up. He wanted some description. This is when your CAPE values are going to be at their highest in this location. This is when we think the cap's going to break. All those kind of things. And us figuring it out as a team, it was fun. It was fun. And really, it started making sense, because we screw this up, we're just going to be sitting out in the middle of nowhere and we're not going to see anything, and then we're trying to play catch up all day. So once we finally decided where we are going, depending on if we needed to travel or not, for the first day, I'll give that as an example. I don't think we really had to go very far, so we were able to kind of just ease into the day. I think some of us spent the time outside kind of throwing the football or frisbee around, just kind of killing time after breakfast. And then eventually got kind of closer to lunchtime, so we grabbed a quick bite to eat. And then it was basically, now let's wait and see. And if I remember correctly, we kind of got ourselves in position, and the cap, those of you that aren't real deep into meteorology, the cap is kind of like a lid on the atmosphere. You need the cap a lot of times to really help promote severe storms, because you want to break through that cap, and it's going to really help these storms explode. But you don't want the cap to be too strong, because then it will suppress storm development. Okay. So basically, I think we were waiting on this cap to break. And I remember that being my first lesson. And it's something I probably had seen hundreds of times, but never really put it together. And this is why I always tell my interns that go to Ball State or go to Valpo. I think Purdue may even offer it now too, or any university for that matter that offers a storm chasing course. Do it, because you can read all you want in a textbook, but to actually have your professor explain what you read in that textbook that previous year in the spring or the fall, and you're watching it firsthand, be like, hey, remember when I said this, and this? Now you're seeing it. And to be able to put a visual on that was one of the best teaching tools I think I have ever experienced in my entire life. The cap breaking, I think, was one of the first things that I remember about that day, because you may be able to take this now thinking about it the next time we get thunderstorms. Usually when you have some high CAPE, this convective available potential energy, it's basically these air parcels rising freely in the atmosphere, and you need CAPE to help promote thunderstorms. You'd look for the puffiness of these clouds. Kind of starts off as a puffy cumulus cloud, but you'd start getting the towers building, right? And if it didn't break the cap, what would end up happening is it'd look a little bit wispy, if you will. And they basically just kind of fall apart, and then another tower would try to go and bust through the cap. Once it finally did that, it stayed that cotton ball, very puffy like, and we would take binoculars, and it was something I had never done before, but you could actually witness these cumuliform clouds just bubbling up all around it, almost like boiling water a little bit. It was incredible to see. And when they broke that cap, boy, they went and they exploded, and you get that anvil head, and here comes the thunderstorm. So day one, we finally get the cap to break, and we're kind of just chasing around Kansas for much of the day. And I think we may have been bouncing from Kansas to Oklahoma, and I think then we came back into Kansas a little bit, and we pulled off on the side of the road. And I remember what made this I don't think I'll ever get the image out of my head in that whole scenario. So we all had CB radios, but it was connected to our weather radio as well. And so we are getting the tornado warning for our area. And so Doc gets on the CB and he says, hey, that warning's for us. We're just going to hang out here because it's for the storm. We're in a safe position. We're on the south side of the storm. The storm's moving north and east. We've got great visibility, and we're just going to check this out. Well, we end up parking, and if I remember correctly, we couldn't get a real good parking spot to just get out of the van and look. We had to kind of run up a hill a little bit to look off in the distance. And all you could see were dark clouds, and you could see some really good, impressive Momanas. And it was at the time of sun setting a little bit, so there was incredible contrast with colors of oranges and reds, and then you've got the grays from the storms and the dark navy blues that you're getting the contrast from. And I run up the hill. Most everybody else did not. It was me and two other people, and I run up the hill and I start screaming because what I see at the hill is this beautiful laminar tornado. It didn't even look like it was moving to me. It looked like a still image, but it was one of those, oh my gosh. That was my first tornado. And I was like, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. And I turned around and I'm like, Doc, it's up here. And he comes running up. And he goes, yeah, everybody come up. And I mean, he was so calm. He's been doing this for years. And everybody, I mean, I think it was everybody's first tornado in that group for the most part. And so we've got the cameras out. Now you have to keep in mind, again, cell phone cameras were garbage. So it would have been worthless for me to try to do a selfie with this thing or anything like that. I had like your digital camera, and I'm just snapping away, just snapping away. Just a beautiful tornado. And we stood there probably for about 3 or 4 minutes, but it seemed like 30 seconds until Doc said, okay, let's move. It's moving away from us. Let's go try to catch up to it a little bit. So we did. So we kind of just followed that thing along, and then eventually it just kind of lifted, and it kept producing a tornado warning because there was a really tight mesocyclone on it, but I don't know if it ever really came back down. I think it did at some point, but it was too dark, and so we kind of stayed back. Obviously, Doc did not want to put us in a position to where we would be in danger and getting in the path of this tornado. So we kind of just stay behind it. We kind of just enjoy the lightning show. And I do remember as we're kind of riding along and we're just kind of trying to get ourselves in a position to chase next day, we end up rolling into a gas station that was leveled. Now, this wasn't one of your big like truck stop gas stations. This was like the middle of nowhere. You see it in the movies. There's like 2 pumps. In fact, I think that gas station was probably closed when the tornado or whatever did damage. I'm assuming the tornado went through, and yes, but we had pieces scattered on the road, and it came up on us very quick. Doc was always the lead car. he and his daughter, and I can't remember who else was with him, but he was the lead car, and then there was the 3 vans afterwards that were chasing with Doc. And he got on the CB, he's like, hey, heads up, we got debris. Then we're starting to feel like, oh, we're in Twister, man, we got debris. And, we're all like, woo. And luckily nobody was hurt. And we watched the news that night, and it sounded like that tornado stayed in pretty rural areas. The damage was minimal, and I think it ended up being rated maybe an EF1. It looked a lot bigger to me than I think it probably really was, but with it being the first, and just the contrast in colors just made it look unbelievable. But that was day number 1, and then we wrapped it up for the night. I don't think many of us really slept. We were just like, whoa, that's crazy. And that was the first night. And word kind of got out somehow. Well, I will say this. First of all, I, at the time, was working at WLBC. It's an FM station in Muncie. I was a part-timer there. I worked there starting in high school. I worked there all through college, and they were gracious enough to give me the entire month off and to let me do this. But they're like, will you call in? We'd love to hear some reports from you in the field. And so I called in the very next day, talked to the late great Tom Hammond, who was the news director at WLBC, and he interviewed me and just kind of talking about the whole experience, basically kind of going through what I just went through with you here. And I think the word got out from there. And so we were doing interviews with several of the TV stations here in Indianapolis. A lot of them were just calling us on the phone. We did phoners with them. We were actually on Good Morning America nationally, which was pretty incredible as well. So that was a neat experience. Just after a couple of days, I think we had another day where we actually caught a couple of tornadoes. So that's kind of got the ball rolling. So it was like the first couple of days they were hot and heavy, severe weather. I want to say the second day that we were out there, maybe the third, we ran into some incredible hail. To that point, I don't think I'd ever seen hail any larger than maybe a quarter. And I remember Doc explaining to me the hail core and how that is visible to us at the surface. And it's something that I never had really acknowledged and probably had never seen to that degree out into the plains. But this storm had a very aqua tint to it. And I said to Doc, Doc, I was like, what is that? Why does that look... It looked green. I mean, it was a very, there's no other way to explain it. It had this very aqua bluish kind of hue to part of the storm. He said, that's the hail core. He goes, that is a lot of hail or it's some really big hail, one or the other. And so we got moving. He wanted to get us out of the hail core because while hail is very cool, it is very damaging to vehicles. We did not get out of the hail core, and so we got stuck in what I remember as, I think, at least golf ball. I'm pretty sure it was baseball size hail. And the sound of that hitting the top of your vehicle, I don't think will ever leave my head. That was one of the loudest, I wouldn't call it scary, but it was definitely an uneasy feeling when it comes to that sound. Because I was sitting in the front passenger seat, and I was a little concerned that the windshield was going to give way. It really, really came down. And what I also remember is we just kind of pulled to the side of the road because we were getting this feeling that we were just basically keeping up with the hail core. So we were eventually just going to let this pass and then we can move on. And we ended up in the middle of nowhere on some county road. Nobody else is traveling it. And all I remember is these poor cows, and they're just standing there and they're just taking it. And I'm hearing them, "Murr." I'm sure it hurt. None of them were really taking shelter under trees or anything. They're just laying there, standing there. I think most of them were standing there. None of them were running around. They were just standing there and just taking a pelting from baseball-sized hail. But we did have a lot of dents in the vans. I remember that distinctly. And yeah, that was pretty incredible. First large hail experience. The biggest day was, and I wish I would have written down the date. I kind of decided to do this subject matter, right on a whim, but the date, I want to say it was probably about a week into it. I know it wasn't right at the beginning. It was probably about a week into it. There was a high-risk day. There was a high-risk day in Kansas and Nebraska, I believe. And so we were kind of hovering in that, if I remember correctly. Now I'm going to have to look at the map. I believe we are in Beatrice, Nebraska. Is that right? I'm looking at the map right now. Kind of thinking out loud, so I apologize. Yes. So we're in Beatrice, Nebraska, which is, if you're not familiar, it's kind of in the southeastern corner of the state. So Kansas bordering down to the south. Lincoln, Nebraska is up into the north. Lincoln, obviously, is where the University of Nebraska is. Kansas City is maybe a couple of hours south and east. Not a whole lot in Beatrice. There was a hotel that we stayed in, and I think there's a Walmart there. We got an oil change. And yeah, so we went there, and it was a high risk. So we went into Doc's room. We did the forecast for the day. What was awesome about that day was my current employer, Wish TV, decided after the success that we had basically in the opening week that they wanted to come out and spend the day with us. So then meteorologist, and he's a good friend of mine, I met him for the first time, Sean Ash. He doesn't work here anymore. He's at a competing station that I won't bring up, but he still works in Indianapolis, a great meteorologist, but he was working here at Wish TV at the time. So he came out with photojournalist Marcus Collins, who is also, he is currently still an employee here at Wish TV. They came out and were able to get out, I think, while we were all sleeping to Beatrice that night. And so Sean and Marcus joined us in that morning forecast meeting, and they filmed their stuff, and they just kind of watched the whole process of all of us going through the forecast. High risk day. All the ingredients were perfect for severe storm and rotating storm development. So basically all it was at that point was we grabbed our lunch, and it was the waiting game. And it was a matter of the cap breaking. I remember us basically just parking on the side of the road, and we sat in a field and just waited. In fact, I think, I can't remember it was one of Doc's friends who was another professor, Pat something. I can't remember. He was a meteorology professor then at Bowling Green State University. And he brought out some lawn chairs, and we just basically sat out there and waited for the cap to break. And once the cap broke, it was non-stop tornado warnings. And I remember seeing the first one drop, and it was a beautiful gray, thin, not a large tornado. It looked like it could maybe get going, but I think there was just so much going on around it that the actual storm in itself never really got to mature because there was energy just getting sucked up from all over the place. You had thunderstorms just developing everywhere. At one point, we had 3 funnel clouds coming down in a very close proximity. We had the ongoing tornado to our right. We had a tornado that was trying to form as a funnel cloud to our left. We're right in the middle. Doc's telling us we got to get moving. We got to get moving because at that point we were basically in the bear's cage, and we needed to get into a safer area so we wouldn't have any tornadoes drop right on us. So it was kind of an intense, my goodness, I would say, I would guesstimate hour to 90 minutes. It seemed like it was 15 minutes to us at the time. But I'm sure it went long. It went on for a while. And finally, we kind of got out of the danger area and was in a better chasing spot to where we could just kind of follow these storms. And man, it just dropped tornado after tornado after tornado. And I think before the sun set, when we just couldn't chase anymore. And the tornadoes were just too far gone, out of reach for us, and we were losing the light of day. I think the final tally was 14 tornadoes, and many of those came in a 2-hour span. Now, most of those were EF0s or EF1s. I don't think in fact, I think the entirety of our trip, I don't know if we saw anything larger than an EF2. But no matter. It was a tornado, and that was an unbelievable day. An unbelievable day that I still tell people about. I'm lucky enough that I kept a copy. My mom videotaped the special that Wish did a 2-day special on that day specifically. But I'm lucky enough that I work here that I've been able to see basically all the raw video, and Marcus Collins has been able to give that to me that I can show my kids and be like, look, I was on this trip. So, because, again, this was an era when I didn't have the luxury of having a smartphone and being able to video everything and that kind of stuff. I have photos, but having the video was special. So that day specifically was special. Now, the rest of the trip, we did see a couple more tornadoes before it was all said and done, but the pattern kind of just flattened out a little bit the last 2 weeks. So we spent most of our time kind of sightseeing around areas, which was also cool because it was areas of the country I'd never been to. We went down to Roswell, New Mexico. We went through Rocky Mountain National Park, went through Denver. We didn't go by Mount Rushmore, but we did go through the Badlands and check all that out in the Dakotas. So areas that I've not been to since, and I was very grateful that I was able to see that part of the country. Went through a lot of Texas, went through Oklahoma, went through Oklahoma City, and that was a great experience. We did end up going through one really impressive hailstorm just outside of Denver, if I remember correctly. It wasn't big hail. It was more the quantity. It looked like it had snowed. And that was the first time I'd ever seen hail of that magnitude in terms of amount of hail. I thought that was pretty cool. So, but some interesting stories to go along with that, and it kind of ties into as I kind of wrap up everything, because I don't want to talk too much, because as I said, I want to spend some time over the coming weeks talking to storm chasers, and if you're one, please reach out to me. I'd love to hear your stories, and maybe we can kind of get a roundtable discussion kind of going about storm chasing, the good, the bad, the ugly kind of thing. What I did notice, there were several other schools that went out chasing. Oklahoma University was one of them. They have just a powerhouse meteorology program at OU there. I want to say Penn State was out there as well. And the other thing I remember distinctly was there were actually tour groups. And I think you can still do this, at least pre-COVID, you could, where any adult could sign up for a week-long or 2-week-long excursion where you basically did what we did as college students. And you'd ride in a van, and you'd have these meteorologists that would be your guide, and they would chase tornadoes. And that was an actual thing. And they were booked solid. And again, I think it all ties into that Twister, how that came about, and the fascination of storm chasing came about to people, 25 years ago. We ran into a Yahoo out there. I don't remember the guy's name, but I think we were waiting, and maybe we were taking a restroom break somewhere, and there was a guy that we ended up talking to because we kind of saw him at a couple of different places. And you see a lot of these guys that chase. If you're in these areas that they see you there, they kind of want to tag along, they want to follow. And when you're chasing in the middle of nowhere, you don't have a lot of options when it comes to using the restroom or getting a snack or getting gas to fill up. So everybody kind of stops in the same spots if you're going to be chasing kind of in the same areas. So, you run into kind of the same people over and over and over again, at least for one day or maybe 2 days. And there was one guy that I remember, don't remember the guy's name. I remember he had a station wagon, beat up one. It reminded me of the station wagon from National Lampoon's Vacation, if you remember that. Kind of had, I mean, it looked like it was straight out of the maybe 70s or 80s. Kind of that ugly green with the wood paneling side. And we got to talking with him, and he opened up his back hatch as we were kind of waiting for everybody to get done, whatever we were doing, either getting food or using the restroom, waiting for all the students to get back. It was me and I think like 5 other people in the class, and we're talking to him, and I think our professor was over there too. And he's got, I am not kidding, it wasn't Dorothy, but it was basically something similar. And this guy was going to make an attempt to lay whatever equipment it was, and it looked like it was like something that he just essentially threw together in his garage. It was like this metal cone thing with what I would equate to like silverware and aluminum foil. Didn't look official, all right? He had like 3 of these. And he's like, I'm going to dump this in front of a tornado and I'm going to get measurements and all this other stuff. So this dude obviously is living the Twister life. All right. We did unfortunately see him, I think either later that day or the next day. And his car was like, I think in a ditch. He was fine. We stopped to see if he needed help. He said no. But I think he tried to pull off the side and get the instrument in front of a tornado, and it didn't work out. And so, but there was a few people like that. So it was interesting. Anyway, if you're a meteorology student right now, any university, and your university or college offers something like this, 100% take it. Take it. If money is a problem, see if you can get grants. I took a loan out, and I went into debt for it, but it was worth it. It was absolutely worth it to me, just the experience. And even if I didn't see what we saw, which to Ball State students, they still talk about that trip in 2004. It's one of the most successful trips that Ball State has ever had for chasing storms. I've had several interns that have come through Wish TV and said, oh, you were on that 2004 trip. I was like, I was. That was a pretty good one. And most of your trips won't be that good. But even if you just see severe storms forming, just watching that happen in real time is just unreal. I highly recommend you take the opportunity to do that. So that's kind of my story in a very brief synopsis, although I say brief, I've been talking for almost 45 minutes, but I could probably talk about it for 2 hours, which is why I want to bring other storm chasers on, because you don't want to hear me ramble on. I want to be able to talk to other people and bounce stories off of each other and stuff, and just experiences, because storm chasers, fair and not fair, sometimes do get a bad rap. There are some idiots that go out there, and a lot of it is they just solely do it for money. They want to sell their videos to news organizations and for social media notoriety. There are other storm chasers that is an invaluable tool to people like me that are broadcasting, trying to get severe weather information out. And these storm chasers are out on ham radios, and they're talking to the Weather Service, and they're saying what they see. They are the eyes, because I work in a windowless studio. So all I know is what I see on radar. And if there's no chasers out there, we don't get confirmation of what's going on. And radar isn't always 100% right. So storm chasers are an invaluable tool. All right, no forecast update since we are off this week. We will be back with a brand new podcast episode next week. So that will be it's not the last full week, but it will be the last few days of the month of March. So wrapping things up pretty quickly, right? But hopefully you can join us then. And while we're on a break, still, we'd love to hear your feedback on what you'd like to hear on the podcast or any comments, concerns, complaints that you may have. You can email me anytime, marcus.bailey@wishtv.com. You can also reach me out on social media. I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Marcus Bailey Weather, and on Twitter @Marcus Bailey. Please feel free to reach out and say hi and let me know what you think of the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here for episode number 60. Hope to hear you and see you back here next week for episode number 61. And while you're here, make sure to check out all the other great podcasts part of the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Discover more from Storm Track 8 Weather and Wish TV. Online at wishtv.com and when you follow Wish TV on Facebook. Plus, be sure to check out more great podcasts from the All Indiana Podcast Network now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.